The assessment team arrived on a Tuesday, which was the day I serviced the filtration units on sublevel 3. That's how I know the exact date. You don't forget dates when they coincide with something leaking. There were 4 of them. Variety, from the looks of it, which meant long-boned and feathered along the forearm and shoulder ridge, dressed in the kind of institutional gray that said official assessment rather than tourism. They came through the main concourse of the Variety Regional Athletic Assessment Center with the unhurried stride of people who had already written their report and were here only to attach the supporting documentation. The lead assessor was carrying a data slate with a stylus already uncapped. The other 3 were watching the hall's central display board with the mild curiosity of a committee inspecting a facility they'd already approved the closure of. I was on my back under a condensate line at the time. I had a clear view of their feet. The assessment center sat at the neutral end of a joint species transit station, which meant it hosted everything from variety sprint trials to Caraxi endurance swims to the occasional courtesy exhibition for species in the preliminary compact consideration tier. Humans were in the preliminary tier. I've been for a while. The assessment today was, technically, their formal evaluation, the event that would determine whether humanity got bumped to the associate compact or stayed in the courtesy bracket for another cycle. I did maintenance at the center. Had for 6 years. I'd seen plenty of assessments. This one started the same way they all did. The lead assessor pulled up the event schedule on her slate, confirmed the preliminary tier human exhibition was logged as the final event of the session, and made a small note. I couldn't see what the note said. I didn't need to. Preliminary tier exhibitions were always the last slot, always allocated the minimum floor time, and always watched with the particular attention of someone waiting for the segment to end so they could go to dinner. The morning's main events went well. Variety sprinters ran the distance trials. Clean, fast, everything in the expected range. The assessors made notes with the quiet efficiency of people confirming what they already knew. Lunch was served in the observer gallery, which is the sort of thing that only happens when an assessment is considered a formality. The humans arrived after lunch. There were 6 of them, mixed ages, one older man in the group who moved like someone who'd spent decades doing physical work and had no particular opinion about that. They set up in a main hall with a methodical pace of people who had a process and intended to follow it regardless of who was watching. One of them, a woman with a practical braid and a worn gym kit, spent 4 minutes adjusting the position of a timing marker on the floor. The assessors watched this from a gallery. One of them leaned slightly toward the lead assessor and said something. I was changing a pressure valve at the time and couldn't hear. The lead assessor made a small sound that could have been agreement. The humans ran a short coordination warm-up, not the efficiency test of variety protocol, but a different thing entirely, improvised looking, the kind of warm-up that happens when 6 people have been doing this together long enough that they don't need to explain it to each other. I noticed the older man was watching the lead assessor in the gallery the way you watch a clock when you already know what time it is. Then the endurance portion started. The variety don't run long. Their physiology isn't built for sustained aerobic output. They peak fast and taper fast, which is why their sprint trials are the thing, and their endurance events use rotation intervals with designated rest periods. It's a good system. It's an efficient system. It is a system built around the assumption that any species capable of locomotion will eventually overheat and slow. The humans did not slow. I had changed the pressure valve by then and moved to a coolant fitting near the base of the gallery stairs, so I had a better angle on the assessors. The lead assessor was still making notes, but the pace had changed. Not faster, slower. The kind of slower that happens when you're no longer filling in a form, but actually reading one. The woman with the practical braid ran the 5th kilometer at the same pace she'd run the first. The older man was slightly behind her, not laboring, just settled into the kind of rhythm that was going to continue until he decided it shouldn't. One of the younger humans was monitoring the others and calling out times in a flat, routine voice. At one point, one of the younger variety assessors crossed to the gallery railing and looked down at the floor display. Not the humans, but the biometric readout panel that tracked exertion markers during official events. I couldn't read the display from my angle. Whatever it showed made her cross back to the others and say something in a low voice. 20 minutes in, The lead assessor put her stylus down on the railing. This is the part one remember most clearly. Not because it was dramatic, it wasn't. She just set it down, flat, and watched. The other three assessors were also watching, with expressions I'd describe as the opposite of the lunch break variety. One of them was standing now, which she hadn't been before. The humans finished the endurance segment. They weren't breathing hard. Specifically, they were breathing the way you do after a long run, but there was no distress in it. The woman with the braid said something to the older man. He made a sound that was almost a laugh. They did a cool down that looked like a conversation. There was a long pause in the gallery. The lead assessor picked up her stylus. She made a note, a long one from the look of the motion. Then she tapped through several pages on her slate and made another. The strength and coordination portions that followed were unremarkable by assessment standards. The humans performed well within the associate compact range on most metrics, slightly outside on two. The lead assessor noted everything. Her three colleagues had stopped eating the afternoon refreshments that had been set out on the gallery table. I don't know why I noticed that. You notice things when you're working quietly and everyone else has gone still. The briefing happened in the observation room adjacent to the main hall at the end of the session. I was replacing a seal on the air circulation duct that ran along the wall of that room, which meant I was technically in the room, technically invisible, and technically in possession of a very clear view of the lead assessor's expression when she set her slate on the table. She had, I learned later, deleted a substantial portion of her pre-session notes. What remained was 3 paragraphs. The first described the endurance results and flagged the thermoregulatory data as requiring independent verification before filing, because it fell outside the existing category ranges by a margin significant enough to constitute a measurement error or a genuinely new input. The second paragraph described the observed coordination style as non-standardized but internally coherent. The third paragraph recommended reclassification of the human delegation from the preliminary courtesy tier to the associate compact level, pending independent verification of the Category 1 flag. She read all 3 paragraphs aloud, in the even, factual tone of someone reporting on a routine outcome. Her 3 colleagues were quiet for a moment after she finished. One of them asked whether the thermoregulatory anomaly warranted a follow-up session before final filing. The lead assessor said that, in her view, no. The anomaly was consistent across all 6 subjects, self-corroborating, and entirely consistent with what the data would show if the data was simply accurate. Another long pause. Then she closed the slate and said the assessment was concluded and the recommendation would be filed by end of station day. I finished the seal replacement, gathered my tools, and left through the maintenance corridor. At the end of it, near the equipment storage alcove, I ran into the woman with the practical braid. She was carrying a gear bag and had the easy posture of someone who'd run a long way and wasn't particularly tired. She asked if I knew where the transport kiosk was. I told her it was the second left past the main concourse board. She thanked me and walked off. That was the last I saw of any of them. The recommendation went into the official compact record 4 days later. I know because the junior admin who processed the filing left a copy of the cover notation on the community board, which is not standard procedure, but is the kind of thing that happens when junior admins are pleased about something. The cover notation read, asterisk thermoregulatory category flag cleared. Data confirmed accurate by independent review. Reclassification effective immediately, asterisk. No annotation from the lead assessor. No supplementary comment. Nothing added. I thought that was probably the right call.